Joining us today to look through some of the top news stories of the week there in the United States. We're joined by David Kusnet, former White House speech director, or director of speechwriting, I should say, to President Bill Clinton. He joins us from Washington. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, David. We're also joined we're joined from Florida by Republican strategist Angie Wong. Thank you both very much indeed. Let's start with Iran, because we've been following developments there all week, and we were just discussing the situation in Iran with some of our guests. It's been reported that President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu held these closed-door talks on Wednesday, talks that lasted nearly 3 hours. Iran very much the focus of those discussions. Angie, let me start by asking you, what do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu was trying to obtain from President Trump? And do you think he left a bit empty-handed?
A little bit. It seems that way. And the press has been trying to read the tea leaves since that meeting took place. It was a short press conference, but really nothing came of it. Benjamin Netanyahu came to the White House to ensure that his wish list was met when President Trump goes into talks with Iran. He had wanted certain things like their missile program to be limited. He had wanted their nuclear facility program to be eliminated. All of these things were big wish lists. Not sure President Trump was biting. And that's a sense the press here in the U.S. has gotten since those talks have began. But what has happened is that President Trump has ordered the Pentagon to ready a second deployment of a second carrier going into the region. So I think all of this is now pressuring Iran to really come to talks, serious talks with the United States. President Trump has a lot of options right now, but ultimately, we can tell that he does not want to have a long-term military presence in the region, certainly not to fulfill the operations that needs to happen on the ground in Iran. He wants allies to come in with him, and I believe Israel would be the greatest ally here. So in order to achieve these goals, the talks will remain. I think that diplomacy is still on the table, but just in case it's not, he's likely to send a second aircraft carrier into the Middle East.
Okay, David, is that your reading of events? And do you think we have this situation where President Trump essentially has two choices? Either it's diplomacy or he goes down the road of some form of military action. Do you think is it a binary choice there for him?
I think most Americans would certainly prefer the diplomatic route, but backed up by power, but not leading to an American military involvement and a regional conflict and very unpredictable consequences. I think most Americans have a complex view of this. I don't think people want Iran to become a nuclear power threatening the region and the world. I think most Americans, overwhelmingly, side with the protesters in Iran and are against the violent repression of the protesters in Iran. I also think that as congressional Democrats have said, the president should go to Congress for support. He's likely to get support for any kind of reasonable response to the Iranian challenge. And I think that would strengthen his hand rather than weaken his hand in negotiations with Iran. And I also think that, especially after the forever wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, most Americans do not want some kind of regional conflict in Iran that would draw in the United States.
Okay, Angie, I mean, do you agree with that? And I mean, which route do you think is looking more likely at this particular moment for the president to pursue?
Well, the ball really is in Tehran's hands at the moment, right? President Trump has already laid out what he would like, which is an end to the killings of protesters in Tehran. He also wants to be able to go into look at the nuclear programs to make sure that they're civilian, and to also have international monitoring of it, and a whole slew of things. But just in case that doesn't ever come to talks, he is going to be sending additional military presence into the region. And he's, unlike unlike Obama, he is now ready to draw a red line and fulfill it if the talks do not happen. So this really pressures everyone in Tehran to get on the program. Again, there are many, many options available to President Trump right now. I believe that he would like to take the diplomacy way, but I think it's a very short window at this point because these talks keep going on and on. They keep dragging out.
Okay, and just before we move on, I mean, David, do you think we can assume that President Trump is getting conflicting advice from people in his inner sanctum, or do you think the Trump administration on the whole is pretty united in terms of what the right approach should be to this issue?
I would think from a distance and without any inside information that there are factions in the Trump administration, as there are in most administrations, and in the Trump coalition. I think there are people there who are more hawkish, who wouldn't be comfortable with the term neocon, but who probably are somewhat in line with what used to be called neocon. And I think there are people like Vice President Vance, who served in the military during the Forever Wars, who do not want to get into another military confrontation. So I think that's reflected in the broader coalition that supported Trump.
Okay, let's move on to our next topic, which is Greenland. And in the early days and weeks of 2026, President Trump made multiple threats that the United States might take Greenland by force. Well, the standoff over the Danish autonomous territory plunged NATO and transatlantic ties into their most uncertain phase in modern history. However, President Trump later backed down on that threat at the Davos summit in Switzerland back in January. However, on Sunday, President Trump reignited discussion by reposting an AI-generated image that showed a map of the United States incorporating Canada, Greenland, and Venezuela. Let me ask you, Angie, I mean, are we going to see this issue of Greenland continuing to resurface sort of periodically over the remainder of President Trump's time in office?
Well, President Trump certainly wants to have Greenland. He has made that a priority in his administration to figure out how to do this. And we thought we had some sort of resemblance of a deal after the latest talks. But it seems like that's gone nowhere, and he's gone impatient, which is what he does. He now is going to go to social media and put up these taunting posts. Why? Because everything has stalled. Here in the U.S., certainly the talk of acquiring Greenland has gone quiet, and he wants to reignite that. But that has also gotten the European and the Fines countries completely up in arms now, so much so that Sweden and other countries are now sending troops, air, land support to Greenland to patrol. So I think that President Trump said, look, I'm not done talking about this just because we went quiet on it. Doesn't mean it goes away. He really wants to acquire it both for national security purposes and also for all the rich minerals that are in Greenland and for also trade pathways. So he really wants this to be part of his legacy. I think he'll get it done. It's not going to be done right away. I hope that talks resume.
Okay, David, your thoughts. I mean, we spoke earlier on this week to a government minister in Greenland, and she told us that this whole issue had caused her and all the Greenlandic people, who she said are peaceful people, considerable anxiety. She said she doesn't want to be American, and even if it's just trolling for fun, she doesn't find it at all funny. She finds it very upsetting. I mean, how's all of this going down in the United States, as far as you're concerned, David?
I don't think most Americans get it exactly what the United States dispute is with Denmark and with Greenland and with NATO. I think a more normal president from either party probably would be in some kind of tense situation with Iran and with the former government of Venezuela. Why on earth we are in a tense situation with Denmark, with Greenland, with NATO, and I know we'll be talking about Canada later. That I think really mystifies most Americans. I have not seen any public opinion survey which suggests that Americans want to formally acquire Greenland at the cost of a confrontation with our allies in NATO. I think there are reasonable requests that the United States can make for greater national security cooperation with Denmark and Greenland, greater access to natural resources, all kinds of greater understanding of the geopolitical considerations. But I don't think you need formal ownership of Greenland in order for the United States to defend Greenland, to trade with Greenland and Denmark, to be part of, to make some use of the natural resources there. And I don't think there's any reason to be talking about a confrontation with Denmark and with Greenland and with NATO as if they were Iran or the former government of Venezuela. The Iran, Denmark, Greenland, and NATO are United States allies, and we can deal reasonably with them.
Right. I mean, Angie, do you think the US political class really has bought into this whole idea?
I think a lot more selling and marketing needs to happen before we really commit to it. But we, those who are in the political class, we do understand the desire to acquire Greenland. A lot of it has to do with space, actually, and for U.S. to be the #1 space frontier, we need to have Greenland secured, as well as for energy. Now, with Greenland, in respect to Greenland, President Trump, he knows that we already spend here in the U.S. close to $4 billion for military operations securing the Arctic areas. And it's funny to now see that all of a sudden Europeans and also Fines and NATO are waking up to the fact that they also need to put in their share and their resources to patrol the area. So that has what has happened in the last few days, right? And President Trump's like, look, why would we continually pour money into Greenland if we don't own it? That's always been his argument. It's like leasing something that you'll never own in the future. So he wants now to really be a shareholder versus just someone who's going to write blank checks for the rest of the United States' existence into something that we don't own.
Okay, David, any final thoughts on Greenland you'd like to share with us before we move on?
I think the whole premise of NATO and the Western Alliance and the Marshall Plan and the foreign policy of the United States since World War II has been that we can defend the nations, our allies in Western Europe. We have good relationships with them economically, national security. We can by all means ask them, as Angie said, to contribute more to their own defense, to offer us more favorable terms on trade. But the idea of just looking at some territory and saying, gimme, we want it, that is not in keeping with what American foreign policy has been under presidents of both parties since the end of World War II. And it's going to end up costing us a lot more than it can gain us. What does it profit us, our country, if we lose our relationship with Western Europe and we gain Greenland?
Okay, well, we're going to leave Greenland for now because it's not just Greenland that is watching President Trump's social media feed with some alarm. The president has also repeatedly suggested that Canada become the 51st state of the United States, and relations between Washington and Ottawa have been seriously tested in recent months. President Trump is apparently angered at Canada's strengthening trade ties with China. And for his part, the Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney took aim at President Trump in a speech at Davos last month. And now President Trump is threatening to block the opening of a bridge paid for by Canada that will link Canada to the United States. Angie, the Gordie Howe Bridge, it costs, billions of dollars. Is President Trump really serious now about blocking that bridge from going ahead and opening?
Oh, he has already. He's extremely serious about it. Right before the grand opening, this would open up a trade artery between Canada and Michigan here in the mainland, and it's jointly owned and it's jointly controlled. So he can only control the Michigan end of it, and I think that's exactly what his plan is until Carney gets on the program with the United States. President Trump has spent the last few months isolating both Russia and China, and the fact that Canada wants to do a lot of trade with China it really bothers him. So I think this is his pressure point. He realizes there's no artery coming in to the United States that way. That's again, we have multiple ways for Canada to enter the United States, especially in Vermont. He can close that as well. These are all borders, right? And he's the border president. I think that this should perhaps push Carney into talks with the United States, because I think it would be a good thing for the United States to be friendly with Canada. And remember, Congress yesterday just blocked President Trump. I think 6 Republicans crossed over to vote for President Trump's tariffs on Canada to be nixed. So I'm not sure if President Trump's really going to win on this. I think he's going to do what President Trump does, which is to troll and also to apply pressure. But even Congress doesn't want to see this happening.
David, do you see this issue being resolved promptly?
I would agree with what I think Angie was saying, that President Trump has run into opposition from his members of his own party as well as the Democrats on this confrontation with Canada. I think that, as with Denmark and Greenland and the European Union and NATO, there is no reason to have this hostile relationship between the United States and our traditional allies. Canada, there hasn't, prior to all this, there hasn't been this degree of hostility between the United States and Canada since the United States Civil War. And the chronology is that President Trump was threatening Canada before Prime Minister Carney had the trade talks with China. So we were not responding to what Canada was doing. Canada was responding to what we were doing. There already is one bridge between the United States and Canada through Detroit. This would be the second bridge. Again, there can be disagreements about although the construction on the bridge, I believe, is basically done. There can be disagreements about the sourcing of the materials from the bridge, or I don't know the details, but what might be the policies of trucks going from the United States to Canada or from Canada to the United States. But there's no reason for a second bridge between the United States and Canada through Detroit to be, to quote a song from my generation, a bridge over troubled waters. There's no reason for this degree of hostility about it. There's no reason for memes showing the United States acquiring Canada as a 51st state. This is the kind of issue that has been dealt with very reasonably by the United States and Canada from right after the Civil War through the second Trump administration. And they've always been very friendly relationships between the United States and Canada. I think of, at least in my own memory, of Bill Clinton and John Chrétien, and also of Ronald Reagan and Brian Mulroney. There's no reason to have this degree of hostility and threats with our allies when there really are threats from Russia and China and Iran and other bad actors. There's no reason to be having fights with our friends.
Okay, let's move on, because we've got one more topic to get through and just a couple of minutes to do so. Last Sunday was the Super Bowl, and the halftime show didn't seem to go down at all well with President Trump. The show was, of course, dominated by the Puerto Rican rap star Bad Bunny, who performed almost entirely in Spanish, although the show was only the 4th most watched halftime show with 128 million views. The spectacle did generate more than 4 billion views on social media within 24 hours. Angie, President Trump called that show absolutely terrible. Why didn't he like it?
Because it was absolutely un-American. The Super Bowl is one of the most American things you can do here in this country. And it is just like a pleasure every single year to get together with your friends and family, eat and watch the Super Bowl, even all the commercials. It is the most American thing you can do. So why was it completely done in Spanish when 78% of American households only speak English, right? So it's really excluding those who are English speakers players. And it also looks symbolically like a takeover by Spanish-speaking performers. So that's where their controversy is. It's because there was so much division caused by this halftime show, so much so that the Super Bowl lost 6 million American viewers just for the halftime show. They went to the TPUSA show, which was named the All-American Halftime Show, featuring Kid Rock and others. So, this didn't have to happen. We just want sports to be sports. We don't need politics in sports as well. We just want a final release and a relaxation period, but we can't even have that when watching football.
Okay, David, I mean, Spanish is the language of choice of Bad Bunny. It's also the language of Puerto Rico, which is an incorporated US territory. I mean, why did the Spanish language performance cause such debate there? I mean, I saw it, and I don't speak Spanish, but it wasn't that difficult to understand, was it?
I think most people got it, that it was an expression of joy and pride by people who are very, very much part of the United States. I want to commend Angie for citing an accurate statistic. She says 78% of Americans don't speak Spanish, which means 22%, my arithmetic is right, 22% of Americans do speak Spanish. And President Trump was saying no one understands Bad Bunny, and that would mean that 22% would have understood the words. And I think everyone watched and enjoyed the music and enjoyed the performance of it and enjoyed the pride and the joy. I think there's a lot of, the United States is not a monoculture. The United States is many cultures. And I think there are, people might have been, watching the show and having pizza or pierogi or buffalo chicken wings or any number of foods that have different regional or ethnic orientations. And Bad Bunny was the first to perform in Spanish. He may be for a while the last to perform only in Spanish, but that's part of America. Puerto Rico is part of America. They have Puerto Ricans on the island and on the mainland who served in every war. I've seen statistics which may or may not be true that Puerto Rico has had more Medal of Honor winners than any other state or territory. They are very much part of America, and anything that is part of America is not un-American.
Okay, Angie, you're going to have the last word on this. I mean, clearly lots of debate, and my social media feed has been flooded with videos and clips and comments and memes of Bad Bunny. Has the debate there in the United States all been along party lines, would you say?
It's not so much party lines. This is great marketing for Bad Bunny. Maybe some Americans didn't know who he was. Now everyone knows who he is because of the controversy. So, he walked away the winner clearly on this one. Remember, when it was first announced that Bad Bunny was coming on to do the halftime show, he said that Americans had 4 months to learn Spanish, right? We did not like to hear that. And then also there were rumors that ICE agents were going to be at the Super Bowl. No way. I mean, no one can afford tickets to the Super Bowl. I mean, I think it was something like $9,000 for the nosebleed seats, right? So there was just so much controversy and politics wrapped up into something that should be a pastime, a pleasure, a Sunday night sport. But, that's what happens here in America, and certainly in Donald Trump's America. But yeah, I hope we don't have to politicize every single thing that we do here. So, but again, Bad Bunny came out the winner. Good for him.
So you didn't enjoy it at all, did you, Angie?
I didn't even watch it.
All right. Well, it sounds like David did. And David, you enjoyed it, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was
Yes.
certainly very colourful. Well, we're going to leave it there. That's all we have time for. Thank you both very much indeed. Angie Wong, David Kusnet, thank you for joining us for a look back on the week in US politics.